ready to go? Thank you. So this brings us to new business. Item B, consider an introduction of Ordinance 590, waiving the first reading, and for the prohibition on the use of polystyrene-based disposable food serviceware by food vendors. And do we have a staff report?
Mayor, members of the council, I'd like to be quick if I may. We are following the county's lead in adopting their ordinance to ban polystyrene food serviceware for use by any food vendors. It's, as the report says, harmful to the environment, and there are plenty of reasons not to use polystyrene. I think as a practical matter, most of the food service vendors that work in Brisbane are not using them at this point, but it's still a useful thing to actually adopt the ban. Through the Open Space and Ecology Committee, we reviewed the San Mateo County ordinance, and they do recommend adopting it as is. The benefit of doing that is that the county then does enforce. They have a certification process for all food vendors, and they do regular inspections for everything else related to health, and now they can follow up and do the polystyrene. So we are recommending adoption of the ordinance, and I'm available to answer questions.
Thank you. Any questions for staff?
I don't have a question, but I just want to comment that, I'm glad that you reached out to the local businesses, and that was something that we thought was important. You did it, and it was nice to know that no one was using them, so. None in the staff report. I didn't see, it said that they were using them.
No one had any issue when the Open Space and Ecology Committee did a survey about the cost and impacts.
Issues with it. Sure. All right. So yeah, good job.
Lori?
Sure. So I had asked staff in advance by email a couple of questions, and I just wanted to go over the responses so that everyone knew them. So I had asked what was considered a food vendor, whether that would apply to food trucks or any other vendors that sell food at the farmer's market or anywhere else in town. And what staff said was that it applies to it would apply to food trucks and other, temporary food vendors in town, like at markets or festivals, because they would be required to have a business license, and that would mean that they are a food vendor under this ordinance. And then I had also asked, well, what happens? The staff report mentioned that there were a few other cities that had not adopted the county modeled ordinance and had made their own and had created their own ordinance. And the response I received was that it was Millbrae, San Bruno, South San Francisco, and Pacifica, and that they had added more stringent provisions regarding the straws and plastic lids, that those would also be banned. But because they're doing that, then they can no longer have this administered by the county health department. So, and I'm not sure we would want to go that far, because having it administered by the county is definitely a benefit. Right? But I wanted to let everyone know that information. Sure. And also we do have some amendments or some slight language changes, which I understand that Councilmember O'Connell had suggested, just to clarify that it is about the prohibition of these polystyrene food serviceware, and that it applies to only food vendors. So, but I'm glad to see that this is finally before the council. I've been kind of pressing staff about when is it going to be coming up, because we really should be in line with the county and with other cities, in keeping with our, sustainable practices. So.
Yeah, thank you for asking those questions and sharing it with us.
Sure.
Yeah, I agree. Couple of quick things. This applies to restaurants and hotels?
Yes, it does. Anyone that distributes food in a container, prepared food in a container.
Okay, so what we used to call doggy bags, I mean,
That's
the
correct.
restaurants do, and that covers that?
That's correct, yes.
Okay. So we got 6 letters from whom?
If I remember correctly, they didn't actually put their names on their letters.
Really?
Really. I mean, so what we did, so we sent out the letters when I was working with the Open Space and Ecology with Natalie. So one of the things that we did is after we got the letters, we also made personal contact with a few of the businesses that we knew still had polystyrene, and we met with, I think Lucky House was one, and they were just turning over their ownership. So we've talked to, I know we've had a conversation with them about it. We talked to, I think, if I remember correctly, 2 or 3 other specific businesses that still had them, and our understanding was they were okay with it. And I think, to the best of our ability to understand, Lucky House will be okay with it, given, I think, if you guys kept the same thing in there, the 6-month waiting period. Based on what we were able to understand in the conversation, that's what we understood, that they would be okay in 6 months.
I hope
Yeah,
if you
right.
mean 6 months from the contact, 'cause it's a 90-day waiting period now.
Oh,
Okay,
okay.
3 months.
right.
Hopefully they didn't order any more.
And,
That's why we made the personal contact with
right.
the different
that was good.
businesses.
That was good. One other quick question, about the environmental exemption, categorical exemption. It's just curiosity, why did the single-use plastic bag ordinance require an environmental report of some considerable content, and this one doesn't?
Yep, that's also a great question. The plastic bag ban kind of limited, the replacements were limited to paper bags for the most part in terms of dispensing by establishments. And so my understanding is that they needed to analyze trees that were going to be used to make paper bags and that environmental impact. The county did for polystyrene a negative declaration, and I read that, and San Mateo also did one, and they found only 3 areas that had less than significant impacts for polystyrene. In the case of polystyrene, there are a number of replacements. There's potato starch, there's another starch, there's paper. There are like 4 replacements. I think I listed them in the agenda report. So there were 3 findings of less than significant impact by the county and by the city of San Mateo, and they actually said that if these reusable containers or compostable or recyclable containers went into a landfill, they would create methane gas, but not any more methane gas than polystyrene, so it was a less than significant impact. And we're also of the opinion that most of those aren't going to go into the landfill. They're going to be recycled, composted, or reused. So given that in this case there were no significant impacts found, our staff was comfortable with a categorical exemption.
Okay,
And
good answer.
the materials that will be used, you said there's some potato starch materials and then paper, of course. So once we have food composting in place through the scavenger company, would these containers be able to be put into the compost bins? Or are there certain materials that would not?
Most would, but they can use recyclable containers also. So there's recyclable plastic that would not be compostable, but it would be recyclable.
Right. Or reusable?
Or reusable, yes.
Okay. Oh, and then one other thing I wanted to mention that I had asked staff was why there was an exemption for raw food placed in styrofoam, and that's because, like, for example, when you buy like raw meat, like ground turkey or beef, it's packaged in styrofoam and then put in plastic, and that's delivered to the stores or I suppose to the restaurants it's pre-packaged, so that's why those were accepted.
Okay.
Well, I want to thank the Open Space and Ecology Committee because they're here and they were pushing this agenda forward, and
For about
staff
2
were
years.
working on it. I know that there were some worries about how it would affect our restaurants and food trucks, and that they did a really good job of reaching out to the community, and I want to thank them for that. I wish this went further. There's exemptions and things that I wish it didn't have, because I'd like to see it all go away, but it's a really good start, and it's something I'm really proud of, so. Yes, it is better than many things. So, do we have any members of the public that would like to speak on this issue? Then I would ask for a motion.
Make a motion to introduce ordinance 590, waiving the first reading.
Second?
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you.
With the changes as proposed by
Yeah, right.
Yeah, oh, yes, thank you.
Mayor Pro Tem.
As I stare at the red writing on my copy. So that brings us to the city manager's report on upcoming activities.
None.
Okay. Which brings us to the mayor council matters.
Nick?
Do we have any countywide assignment subcommittee reports?
Well, we had a few from the last meeting that got carried over, and we've had a couple since then, so I'll just run through them really quickly. Okay, so the Economic Development Subcommittee met on September 10th. Then at that point, we had talked about planning for this workshop, which we've now scheduled, and talked about creating a work list. The Public Information and Technology Subcommittee met on September 18th. We talked about the social media policy. The police are adding a Facebook page. And we talked about there's going to be some fiber optics installed in various locations. I think at the fire department, firehouse, city hall, and the marina, I believe. And there's going to be a review of the hardware used at City Hall to see if there's any upgrades that could be done. Then we had, most recently, the Health and Safety Subcommittee met yesterday, and we talked about a number of issues. I have that agenda report with me so I can take a look at what those were. We talked about some noise issues and potential amendments to the noise ordinance. We talked about dog walking and dog park rules. And we talked about the Silver Spot Playground, and there is going to be some repair work done. The families in town should be pleased to know that there will be two playground elements that will be repaired. The two ride-on toys, ride-on elements that had broken are going to be replaced. There's going to be some other minor repairs to the playground. And we talked about bathroom access at Silver Spot, and it was determined that if people would like to use the bathroom, they can go over to the pool, and we'll make it clear that people, as long as the pool is open, that people are welcome to use the pool for that purpose, the pool restrooms.
The pool's restroom.
Yes, and we'll have to work out a way to make sure that the pool staff can, let them into the restroom making sure at the same time that they don't keep going into the pool without paying. But, small community, we probably won't have a problem with that. We talked about, it was actually quite a long meeting. We also talked about the police security aids, the PSAs, and got a report on, what sorts of issues they were seeing and whether or not we would want to continue with that program. And then we also talked about the Safe School Zone campaign and the safe routes to school. And then we had so many things to talk about that we were going to have another meeting to talk about additional issues. And then we had also on the same day, yesterday, an open space and ecology liaison subcommittee. Ray and I talked about we're going to be meeting with the Open Space and Ecology Committee, and we talked about what issues we're going to be discussing with them. And then also, not subcommittee-wise, but there was the League of California Cities Conference that a couple of us attended. Cliff was there, myself and Clark, and we brought back a lot of good information, which we've passed on to staff, and hopefully we can utilize some of that, as well as the contacts that we made. And also, I had attended, I'm on the task force that's looking at sea level rise vulnerability. Dave Pine put on a meeting on that last week, and we're going to be doing some assessments of sea level rise throughout San Mateo County. And then another subcommittee or another task force is going to be looking at some funding mechanisms so that we can hopefully put some planning in place like they have in Santa Clara and other counties regarding sea level rise. So we've been busy. So those are all the subcommittees that I've been on.
Thank you.
I've met.
Yeah, I'd just like to report on one, and that is I met with the Complete Street Safety Committee, and they have put together a really excellent proposal for the safe streets to school. Very detailed and very well thought out, and they really have done their homework. And so we suggested that they have one big public meeting where it's on TV, and because it's going to affect a number of streets and kids and so forth, and so that people should be aware of what they're proposing and see whether they're happy with it. And so that's going to be, I think, the first or second Wednesday in November when that event occurs. And then if they get good feedback and the public is happy with their proposal, then of course it comes to the council for implementation. But that committee is really working well. I was very impressed. Very impressed.
Yeah, I've heard reports of that.
Nice. Yeah, let's see. I had a meeting at Phil Ting's office. It was coordinated through the city of Millbrae. City of Millbrae is interested in accessing this conduit that runs from San Francisco to San Bruno, and they would like to put high-speed fiber optic cable through it. And San Francisco is, there's been times when San Francisco was interested in allowing access and then not, and so there's this hope that perhaps the other cities, that all the cities that are along this conduit line might join together and see if we can access that conduit line. But of course, we need to see if does it make sense. And so we're going to be scheduling an economic development joint subcommittee with Millbrae to talk about that. Their pitch is that this high-speed fiber optic can then power the new 3D printers. And so that, since we have warehouse space, it could be an opportunity to bring new types of manufacturing, high-tech manufacturing to the industrial park, as an option to freight forwarding. And then, just kind of going in that theme of the conduit. So I had an LPMG meeting, which is the Caltrain CalMod meeting. We make recommendations to the Joint Powers Board, and so it's mostly about electrification of Caltrain, and where we are in the process. And so they are running this conduit line, the full length of the new, the full length of the track. And so they're proposing keeping some space available for use with cities or maybe private enterprise too. So they're putting in this conduit, which is very expensive, and so they're trying to find a way to make some money and provide this access. So it could be pretty good for us too if they say put the conduit line on the east side of the tracks, since we might have this potential on the west side that's already existing. And then when I was at that meeting, I had a conversation with Juliet. I forgot her last name, but she's with San Francisco. And we talked a little bit about the RFP to have Brisbane be a site for the relocation of the 4th Street and King Street rail yard. And she indicated to me that they have every intention to have Brisbane be a site location. That I said, well, wouldn't it be better if we all kind of coordinated and discussed and tried to be good neighbors? And she says, well, basically this is what we want to do, and we'll see how it goes. So then last night we had an SFO roundtable meeting, and as you know, the airplane noise has gotten worse over the last several weeks. There have been a lot more complaints, and it's unfortunate. When when the runway was under construction, we were supposed to get a break, and they did this separate route, the shoreline route, and this particular flight procedure is not coordinated from TRACON. Right? This is the flight procedures that we deal with now. Those directions come from TRACON. So when they vector over our homes, and that is done by the folks near Sacramento. The shoreline departure, the pilots are supposed to stay on the east side of 101, and after a few weeks, they started getting a little bit more lazy, and then they would do these long turns, and the long turns went over our town, which was really unfortunate, because I think the majority of those flights should not have, those ones that came over Brisbane should not have occurred. So one of the things that we did discuss, and I'll make it brief, is that Palo Alto is interested in joining the roundtable, and it was actually quite a contentious meeting last night that lasted a really long time. The southern cities want Palo Alto to join, the northern cities not so interested. I kind of look at it like a basic aid district. You have a pot of money, and you bring in a new kid, you got to divvy up the money. And each city contributes $1,500. All right, so that's it. So whether you're a small city like Brisbane, $1,500, big city like Daly City, Redwood City, $1,500. So Palo Alto's got a lot of noise issues. They would suck up a lot of staff time and resources for that $1,500. So in the end, we voted not to allow them to join. So it was a 9-5 vote. But Palo Alto is not going to stop. They already said they're coming back, and they're going to try and get folks to go their way.
So they're impacted all the way down there by the noise at SFO, they're claiming?
Yeah, so there's this thing called the Menlo interchange, I think it's called, where the arrival flights are coming through this gate. And so it's right there
flights.
on
It's right over
yeah,
there.
so our issues are departures.
Departures.
Right.
Their issues are arrivals.
Right.
Yeah, so it's, kind of like the north and south. But, even though it was a lively debate, it didn't get ugly. The one guy did yell, and I had to stop the meeting. And I had to take him outside, and we were going to call the sheriff, and in the end he calmed down, and it was we continued the meeting. So yeah, so that's pretty much it.
It's exciting. One other thing I forgot to mention that happened at the Health and Safety Subcommittee meeting was about the community park. We approved of a proposal to put a fence or a gate to prevent the kids from running out onto Old County Road, and that will go on the north side between the bathrooms and the existing fence. It'll just be on one side so that there'll still be ADA access. You know, people want to come around the other side, but we felt like it was mostly of a concern from that side of kids getting out and behind the bathrooms and going out onto Old County Road, which was more heavily trafficked. So stay tuned for that.
Okay, so do we have any written communications that we need to acknowledge? Okay, and oral communications too. I see no members of the public. So with that, I would like to propose an adjournment.
Motion to adjourn to successory.
Oh, well, we have to adjourn this meeting.
Adjourn this meeting, right?
Yes?
And then we have to open the other one.
Yeah.
Motion to adjourn this meeting.
Second.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Of course.
Okay. Do we need to change tapes?
Won't take very long.
Okay,
Okay. We need to wait 2 minutes, or we got 2 minutes?
wait 2 minutes.
Wait 2 minutes.